see that we've got our panel of experts well and truly ready. So let's roll into our Ask Me Anything session. So of course today we have been talking about the ways that organisations across APAC are using Viva Engage, but we certainly wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to connect with the fantastic team from Microsoft. And we've received lots of questions from customers and organisations about Viva Engage, not only from a product perspective and looking at new features and functionality, but we also get lots of questions from a best practice perspective as well. So what we've done today as a special Viva Engage Festival feature, we have rallied a panel of experts to help you with all of your burning questions about Viva Engage. So while I'm talking now, if you have any questions that you'd like to start adding to the Q&A, please do start doing that now. But the way that we'll make this session work, so we do have about 45 minutes or so for us to have this open Q&A, Ask Me Anything AMA session with the Microsoft team. So please do start using the Q&A, and I'm sure we'll see those questions jumping through in just a second. Also, when you are in the Q&A, if you see any questions there that are similar to something that you would like to ask, also just use the reactions and the thumbs up as well. It just helps with sort of like upvoting so that I can prioritize those questions to share with the team as well. But I think as well, you know, when we think back to some of the survey results that we heard, you know, with people wanting to hear more about Viva Engage and the questions that people have and the topics and the themes that they're wanting to hear about, some of those really clear key themes that came through were about how to actually get your colleagues engaging on Viva Engage. As I mentioned when we started off today, this was an overwhelming theme, so I'm sure we'll jump into that in just a moment. Of course, how to get leaders active as opposed to having comms driving a lot of the discussion or always being the ones to post on behalf of. Also sustaining and maintaining engagement. I know that, you know, definitely, you know, Leonie had shared some really great ideas earlier from Ventia about how they are tackling that particular challenge. And also, you know, frontline workers. I know that many of you attending here today, you have large proportions of your workforce who are working on the front line. How do we capture their interest? How do we get them to enter the conversation? How do we ensure that their voices are also heard? Okay, so without further ado, I'll start to jump into the Q&A. And also just to introduce the wonderful team from Microsoft as well. So we have Steve, Alison, Venkat, Paul, Adam, Erin, Lauren, and Sandra. And perhaps maybe the Microsoft team, when I prompt you with these questions, if you just want to quickly introduce yourself as well, let us know a little bit about your role, and then we can get straight into answering the people's burning questions. So let's kick off. I'll just jump into the Q&A now, and I'll just see if we have anything coming through. Looks like nothing just yet. Perhaps in the chat, I think I saw a few questions. Let me have a look.
While we're waiting, Emily, for questions, I just want to say thank you again to the Swoop team for putting on the festival and bringing our customers together like this. It's, I think, the 4th year of this, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And it's always a wonderful event, and thanks to our customers for taking the time to present and share your stories. We hear so often from our customers they desire to connect with each other and hear from each other. So really appreciate the time that the Swoop team puts into pulling this all together. So thank you so much, team.
Thank you. No, it's our pleasure. We love bringing the community together, and of course we love having Microsoft along to support as well. But you know what, I might actually just kick off with a question of my own, which I think seemed to come out in the survey that we had shared pre-event, just to hear about the things that were at the top of people's mind. Totally up to you. I'm not sure, Steve, if you wanted to maybe prompt the best person to respond, but let's start with this one. How do you get people to actively engage on Viva Engage rather than just being an observer? So how do you sustain that engagement on the platform?
I'll start, and maybe Lauren is one of the PMs for the team that works a lot on the Corp Comms capabilities, can maybe weigh in as well. But I heard in one of the earlier sessions, Lori mentioned asking questions, just being curious, and you know, especially when leaders ask questions and show curiosity. Those are oftentimes the best ways, I think, to get people participating. And what we see oftentimes is, with the question post type, we see question posts get about 70 to 75% more replies and reactions than just regular posts do. So even using that question post type really tends to draw people out. The other thing that I also found somewhat surprising recently was, and we actually did a poll on this in our Viva Engage customer connection community, and I haven't divulged the answer to it yet. It's just reminding me I need to go back to it. But we asked the poll of what is the most engaging post type that we have on Engage, between poll, praise, question, regular discussion, articles. It turns out praises are the most engaging post type, and generally garners a lot of celebration and people wanting to weigh in and participate. So questions certainly generate a lot of replies and reactions, but overall, per capita, praises are the most engaging post types.
Any other insights from our other Microsoft crew, Lauren?
Yeah, those are awesome, Steve. A couple things I would add. When you think about the communities you have in your organization, what are those rituals that you really want to foster and encourage? So welcoming new members to communities and building celebrations around that, celebrating promotions, taking advantage of regular social activities through community campaigns that maybe are less, top-down directional and more centered around building, a fun and engaging atmosphere for all of your employees to share their unique perspectives around. So I would say, really taking advantage of the breadth of the different types of posts, leveraging community campaigns for that bottoms-up engagement. I know my favorite time of year at Microsoft is this past month when we do the giving campaign. So people would chime in and talk about, which different organizations they wanted to contribute to and why it was important to them, and hearing unique stories and perspectives on a variety of topics, really builds a safe place for people, to share their own opinion as well.
And I think also oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add on, like, people tend to respond most to content and topics that are and relevant to them. So at like one to many, that's leadership engagement, right? So people care about what their leaders are thinking and doing. And so where you can drive leadership engagement in the network, you're going to get better participation. From the bottoms up perspective, like Steve said, praise, right? Like specific, it's relevant, it's celebratory. And so there's that. And then anything there where they can identify as an expert or have their voice heard, right? So relevant content through campaigns or Q&A. But also with anything where they can sort of lean in and have their voice heard. So leveraging AMA events in communities is another way to introduce people, like ask a question, get it answered, see that value loop, and then that tends to catalyze participation as well.
Would it be all right? I've got a question for you. Something that came up in our survey before the event as well. I'm not going to ask you to comment on specifically, but more the impact of it. We know that a workplace is sort of thrown a towel in the ring, and as I've been following conversations, and it comes from the survey as well, there's a lot of companies that are now moving from workplace to Viva Engage. So they've already had one platform, so it's different to, for instance, maybe Venture that we heard of earlier today, where they're sort of rolling it out, like brand new. Have you guys, what's kind of like, is there anything people need to be aware of, or anything you would tackle differently when you're moving from a platform like Workplace and then into Viva Engage? Anything your customers have learned from that transition, anything they have to be aware of, or is it just like a new launch?
Yeah, Guy Murali here. Maybe I can jump in and others can help. So we've got a couple of customers take completely different paths. Some have effectively cleaned shop and started with a clean slate. And that's interesting because they just didn't want to be in a position where they were carrying any of the old, baggage, if you will, good or bad. But there are some customers who are looking for migrating content. And then even at that, our recommendation would be to treat this as a relaunch, even if there's existing content, because the capabilities of the platform are different. The sensibilities of how you engage on this platform are different. The use cases will be different because we have many more features than Workplace had. For example, AMAs or campaigns, and the analytics is richer. So, we would recommend really rethinking or thinking of this as a new launch. I think the main thing that customers will have to decide is whether they want to bring in some of their old content or not. And if so, how much? And if so, if they want to bring in some, do they want to have a cutoff point? They want all historic content, or they want just the last year's content, or just the content in the communities or groups, in that case, that have had the most usage or the most relevant.
Excellent. I think that sounds like very, very sound advice. Thank you, Murali.
I would
I
add
think
to
also
that.
very relevant.
Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, Paul. You please jump in. Sorry, this is the second time I've done it to you.
No, I've done it to you. I apologize. I'll raise my hand. I would just say one other thing that I think I've seen specifically with a number of customers coming from Workplace is that they've learned a lot along the journey about social in their organization. And at any point, I think there's sort of a backlog of things that they wish they might have done differently. And many of them are seeing the transition to Viva Engage, and not just its new capabilities, but how they would want their network and social interactions, including group membership, and how they would focus topics and all of those things, and are kind of viewing it as a fresh start. And so they're kind of taking that information architecture approach as well, just because it is such a substantial move for them to fix some of those things.
Hey, Emily, maybe just one more thing to add, because I think it'll be important to some of our customers, is the sort of the gestalt of Engage is different, in the sense that one of the things that we've decided a while ago is we want to reach people where they are in the tools they use every day. That's very different from the Workplace philosophy. So you have to treat this as a relaunch, in the sense that you're helping people understand that you're going to get content coming to you in Outlook or in Teams. And that sort of experience of using a social platform and the constructs of those other tools are very different for people who aren't used to that. So I would really think of this as it's a broader, bigger, more rich, feature-rich platform, but reaches you in places that you perhaps don't expect to. So, think of that as part of your rollout strategy.
Yeah, just to add on to that, there's a question from David in the Q&A about the email notifications that come in a very interactive form, and that's one of the things that Murali is referring to, and also in Teams, being able to reach people directly in Teams. So really, what we really try to do is give your employees an opportunity to choose how and where they want to engage, and even Kai or whoever might be facilitating the EMEA session later with Vodafone. One of the things you might try to tease out of Ed when you talk to him is just some of the things that they talk about with how much engagement they've seen as a result of moving from Workplace to Engage. And a lot of it is predicated on what Murali was just talking about.
And I do know that we have quite a few people tuned in right now who are in that position at the moment. Either they have decided that, Viva Engage is going to be the path forward. I know that some organizations are still sort of in that discovery phase. So I'm hoping that some of the insights that we're already sharing here will be helpful for those people. I can see some of them are asking questions too. Just speaking of, some of the points that you made around, Outlook as well. There's just a question here about how do you distinguish within, your Microsoft tenant on the right, or the correct use of Outlook versus Teams versus Viva? I know it's a question as old as time, but I'm just wondering what your input would be on a question like that.
I'm happy to take this as well. Again, I'd love to hear from others. Let me give you an anecdote. Like Microsoft, historically has been a very email-centric organization. And for us, reaching people in Outlook is perhaps the biggest shift and change that we made. We suddenly saw a huge increase in the number of people we were able to reach at Microsoft. So the first thing I'd ask is take a little profile of yourself as a company and say, what sort of communication modality works best for your culture? Is it a Teams-heavy company? Is it a email-centric company? Or were they used to using Workplace as the primary tool of communication within those companies? And if so, tailor your approach to what works best, because that'll give you a chance to reach the most people. In the long term, our view is that you're going to reach most people in Teams. Teams becomes this hub where you can have meetings, you can do one-on-one chats, you can have these large-scale communities that you can work with deep, native sort of feel from Viva Engage. We announced some of this at Ignite this year with Storyline as the first element that's going to arrive natively in Teams. So that's sort of a mid to long-term arc, but I think looking at yourself as an organization and saying what your communications patterns are and using that as a way to guide your strategy would be best as a start. I also think that each individual within even those companies that may be email-centric or team-centric are different. So helping individuals understand that they can consume content in this platform without actually having to go to it all the time, but encouraging them to go to it because there's so much richness in the web experience or the mobile experience that we've built, but trying to find ways in which each individual can tailor their interaction with Engage in the way that they see best fit.
Yeah, this is Venkat. Just to add to what Murali said, in the past, sometimes this question from customers used to be a proxy for a different kind of a question, which is, I may have information which is important and urgent. I may have information which is important but not urgent. I may have things which are for information only. And which tool should I use for each? One of the things we work very hard in Engage in partnership with Outlook and Teams is to reach for any of these three types of communications, be able to get to the user where they are in Outlook and Teams, like Murali said. So really more it's around what capabilities do you use in Engage to send out the information based on the urgency and the importance? Do you do something called an essential announcement? Do you do just a plain announcement? Do you just post it and let it go? And even within Microsoft, the leadership team, like in their communications team, like Satya's team has played with these to come to the right mix of things to use. So, that actually, and then looking at the analytics, which gives you an aggregated view across all these clients, no matter where the user is accessing and interacting with information, will help tailor kind of the right communication strategy for that, for each company.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm just having another scroll through some of the questions here. There was quite a specific one that I think came in quite early. I'm just going to read it out as is because it's maybe one that's going to go over my head a little bit. Microsoft Viva Engage results in workplace search. Will it also be available through the Bing Enterprise Search in brackets EDU tenant?
Sandra?
Yeah, so the Engage search, we're starting to roll out questions and answers into workplace search or within your tenant search. You need to go back and confirm that there's no difference in the way EDU is set up for you. But as long as it's not web, like internet web search, you should be able to get in your search results in your internet or intranet. So we're starting to roll that out soon. It's saturating now, and you should see it in the near future, early of new year.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Sandra. And actually, there's a question in here that's maybe a little bit more lighthearted, but it does actually have a lot of reactions against it. So just to mix things up a little bit, what is your favorite Viva Engage feature? And what's one feature you wish that was in the platform?
It's hard to pick a favorite. It's like your children, right? I love search because I can never remember where anything is. I used to be a huge fan of communities because I organize my information that way. I can keep up on certain technologies and certain, special efforts like charities and stuff I participate with at Microsoft. But I'm a growing fan of Storyline. And part of the reason why I'm a growing fan of it, I'm a bit of an introvert. It might not be easy to tell that here. So I'm not great at publishing things out broadly. But every time I do, I'm amazed at the connections that I build and the people I can start to interact with that intersect with what I'm doing. And we start these conversations and start building on each other's work. So growing fan of Storyline, even though I tend to be a little bit more reserved on that type of capability.
I was just going to actually build on top of Sandra and say Storyline in Teams. So something that's been, pretty prevalent at Microsoft, at least in my day-to-day uses. I spend a lot of time in Teams, right? I'm using that for one-on-one chats, checking up on collaborative projects. And now we recently announced Storyline in context of Teams. And just today, a colleague was visiting from out of town. A bunch of us met in the hall, took a quick selfie, and it was already in Teams. And we got to celebrate that moment, which was more community building, right in the place that I'm doing my day-to-day work from. So bringing all those tools together has started to feel even more magical.
Yeah, Emily, very quickly, I'd say one feature that I really like is to see some of the analytics on the conversation card itself, because it gives me a sense. We had a post internally from one of our leaders, which had, I don't know, thousands of likes and hundreds of other reactions and a couple 100,000 views. And it just made me feel about, as a person, one cog in this massive machine of Microsoft with 220,000 people, how with just a piece of communication you could reach such a wide audience. And so that's my tactile touch as to how wide the reach of a specific piece of content is. There is no other tool that can do that. And if it can, email can, because you're forced to read it, but it cannot give you the tactile feeling of how wide and big this company is, or the company that you work in. And there are many customers here that are from very large companies. The one feature I'd wish we had was, as part of Microsoft, we are really focused on security, privacy, and compliance, but that limits us in certain cases. So for example, if you want to bring some consumer into a collaborative context, it's just not straightforward to do. If you don't have a Microsoft account. There are ways in which we can get around that with guest access and so on, but those are cumbersome. So I feel that we could be a little more fluid in the collaborative context by bringing people from outside of an organization. So I wish we had that. I'm not sure we can pull that off as easily as other companies can, but because of the other benefits that we provide, but that's one feature I wish we had.
Yeah, I think my favorite feature, Emily, is this new type called article. So we've always had posts, and you can include videos and such. You can include links. It shows some, the pictures at the very end. Article totally changes the way you tell your story. And internally on our team, like Murali said, Microsoft's a massive company. So even within the Viva Engage team, we publish a monthly newsletter, which is, what's happening with the product, what our customers saying, and it's sourced by different people. And the article lets you intersperse write-ups with pictures, and it just takes care of rendering it everywhere. It's so much more easier, so much more compelling as a newsletter, and really does a much better job of representing the entire team's efforts. So I've fallen in love with that feature. And in that context, what I would love, and I'm looking at Lauren because Lauren owns this feature, is I would love to also be able to do videos in line. And I know that's something the team's thinking about, but it would really further, bring it to life. But article would be my number one favorite feature.
Can I just say here, I know, Steve, you got your hand up as well, but can I just make a note here and say it's amazing. Not a single person yet have mentioned Copilot, which I think is because every time.
No, I was going next, and that's what I was going to say is there are some really cool things that we're starting to see and that we're starting to experiment with Copilot, where I can just go to a community and it says, see a summary of the what happened in this community. I click the button and Copilot gives me a quick summary of the most recent post. That's been an amazing way for me to catch up as a community manager of certain communities on posts, but also super excited about how Engage content is going to show up in your M365 Copilot experiences. So all the work that you all are doing to help derive and build knowledge in your Engage networks is soon going to also pay off in the form of people being able to use Copilot and Copilot being able to reason across the stuff that's happening on Engage and show within the Copilot results. That's been amazing too. Oh, and I want to be able to post in multiple communities with one post.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for sharing on that one. It's just a bit of a fun one to throw in there. Maybe sort of back to some questions more so focused on best practice. So this is just a comment and a question. We see our employees, particularly those under 25, are very passive on Viva Engage. We've tried fun, topical posts, yet they view the post but don't necessarily react or comment. Any suggestions on how we could approach this or encourage more participation? I know we've spoken a bit about asking questions. I think in the chat we had mentioned things like app mentioning. Is there anything else that we can try with these millennials, or what are they, Gen Z? These are the ones that we need to try and target.
Emily, you have a lot of experience in this from your past life too. You probably have some great insights to share here. But one thing I'd go back to is from the Australia Post session earlier today. If any of you were on that one, or go back and watch it if you weren't. But contests, I think especially for this demographic, I think running contests and getting people involved in contests and using campaigns as a way to facilitate those things, I think are great things. Even, small things, giving away, maybe some small gift card to a coffee shop or something like that are great little things that sometimes are needed to help get people involved.
Mm. And then I'm also wondering as well about.
Murali, was saying
Oh,
something?
apologies.
Yeah,
sorry,
I was on mute for a second. Emily, I was going to suggest that maybe pick a few people who could be ombudsmen or champions and use them to sort of seed activity in others. We found this sort of very successful in almost any sort of community building effort. So if it's a little more grassroots, I do think a lot of these questions are on that. How do you get people to engage? How do you make people feel comfortable? A lot of this, I think, is a reflection of the culture of a company in some sense. So how do you shift and change that to becoming more of an open culture? I think another thing that you could do is to get your leaders to engage. If they are vulnerable, if they're open, you're going to find that other people will engage, more readily as well. It's not like the Gen Zs or Gen Zs in this case, right? Or Gen Xers, I don't know, Gen Zs don't want to engage. They do, but they don't know what the consequences of that are. And if a leader can establish a pattern, then I think it would help.
I think that kind of ties into one of the more recent questions that have popped up just about establishing and nurturing a champions type network or that type of program. But just sort of back to the leader part that you've just touched on there, Murali, how do you make the business case to leaders in a way that gets them genuinely committed to leading by example and Viva Engage? Yeah, that might be a very big question, but I'm really keen to know your thoughts.
It's a good one for you, Murali.
Yeah.
As leader yourself.
I think then I go back to this analytics thing, maybe we need to help here is to find a way in which with a minimal effort, a corporate communicator or a delegate or a leader can effectively reach their entire populace and get a sense of sentiment and interaction on something that's positive or newsworthy, or maybe even it's somewhat difficult conversation to have. I think that's, if we can show leaders, look, this is the sort of impact we can give you with a platform like this, then I think it'll help leaders understand the benefit of this platform. I'd say that at Microsoft, it's sort of interesting. Many of our leaders, even our most senior leaders, have taken to this platform now, but it took a long time, mostly because it's an email-centric company. And even internally, we didn't have the best sort of marketing and branding for this product in the past, and some of the features were missing. So I'd say that trying to sell a leader by saying, here is the impact that you can create, and that's something maybe we can help. The second thing I'd say is that leaders are mostly afraid that when they put something out there and be vulnerable, they might get some sort of negative feedback and content. I think selling them on our digital safety strategy and saying these are the sorts of things that we can help you. We're not here to control what you say or do, but we can help you understand the edges of those conversations, which may be somewhat negative or perhaps not exactly what you're looking for, are ways in which I think we can make leaders feel a little safer. All you need is one. If you get one or two, others will follow. So that's what we've done in our company. There's a couple of leaders that we haven't been able to get to this platform. But for the most part, even our most senior leaders are using Engage now.
Yeah, to build on what Murali said, in the end, for them to embrace Engage, it has to solve maybe one of the problems they have. For example, one of the ways we got one of our EVPs, Rajesh Jha, in is he was always wondering, he does this monthly town halls. Am I actually addressing the things which are top of mind for people? And he has like tens of thousands of people in his org. He has no way to know that. So what his team did in collaboration with the Engage team is they started doing like sourcing questions through a feature called AMA ahead of the town hall, and then let people, it's moderated. So not every question makes it to the list. They get a chance to look at it and approve it. But then of the approved questions, people get to vote on it. And so then what he started doing in the town hall is he would try to answer the top voted questions. He allows some during the meeting impromptu, but this was a great way for him to really get to the crux of the questions the teams, his division had on their mind. And so it solved a problem he had with trying to guess what the audience wanted him to talk about. So similarly, if you can plug into an existing rhythm of business the leader has and solves a pain point they have, you're more likely to get them to start to use Engage. And over time, we built enough features that you will likely find something which addresses some need they have.
Thanks for sharing on those insights about leadership engagement. I'm just referring back to the Q&A again. This is a question from someone who's still relatively new to Viva Engage and in a bit of a discovery phase. Are there any automated moderation tools in Viva Engage that can be used in a live event setting?
Yeah, I mean, we can all answer this, I'm sure. You can set up your Q&A. In fact, in this particular one, we haven't set that up because it's an open forum, but you can set all questions to be moderated. So a small set of organizers then first get to see the question and then can decide whether it's relevant for that conversation and then publish it to others. And we're building more capabilities around this, the richness around the ability of going back to each individual and saying, I've decided not to include your question for this reason. So it's more like a one-on-one conversation between the organizer and the person who asked the question. We also support anonymous posting. So there's a lot of capability around making sure that there's an ability for first the asker to feel confident and free to ask a question, and for the organizer and moderator to feel comfortable that they're going to keep questions around the topic at hand and not something that may be random or irrelevant at that moment. Yeah, so all of that exists today.
There's some other cool things that we're doing, Carl, not exactly related to your question, but we're also doing things to improve the live event experience. So for example, if we're answering this question that you asked, we're going to provide the organizers and moderators an opportunity to present that question right on the screen, so everybody knows this is the question that we're currently addressing on the screen. So we're more improvements on the live event front are coming.
Yeah,
I think it hasn't got to. Sorry, go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah. I was going to say we have a broad set of moderation capabilities already in the product, not just for AMAs and live events, but also for communities, conversations, corporate communicators coming online. If you're looking for best practices for moderation, reach out to your account rep, start a conversation with us. We're continuing to evolve this space very quickly. And so the more folks we have giving us, feedback and information, the better off we can start, making inroads into additional automation for you.
In fact, in 6 months, I'd say we've gone from a deficit situation around, people feeling comfortable posting on these platforms because there's moderation capabilities and digital safety feature sets to something that was a leading capability for this platform. And we learned a lot from our own experience because of what happened on October 7th, a year and a couple months ago, all the way to now. People have been concerned about what the happenings in the Middle East, and that's created all sorts of conversations within ours and other companies. And that's helped us sort of build the features to help have the support where people can still respectfully have those conversations, but when they get out of hand, there's ways to deal with them.
And perhaps maybe more of a the feature focused question here. Are there any tools in the Microsoft suite that can be used to manage leadership Viva Engage profiles and sharing updates?
Yeah, I see this question is also referring to things like Hootsuite and Sprout, maybe Sprinkler. I'd say the closest thing we have in the Microsoft suite would be something like Viva Amplify, which allows you to effectively create a communication in one place and then be able to distribute it across multiple places, multiple channels, if you will. So you could create a post, or you could create a communications campaign, if you will, and then be able to have it published to a SharePoint site, be able to publish to send out as an email to a targeted list, and have that go to Engage to somebody's storyline. So happy to talk through that further with you, Karthik, if that's of interest.
Yeah, Karthik, it'll be great to learn from you what the use cases might be for an internal platform. I can fully understand what Hootsuite does, of course, with LinkedIn and Instagram, or any of these other social platforms, Twitter. But I think in the context of an internal platform, I'd love to understand how we could make this easier.
I mean, just a couple of comments. I know that there are more questions in the Q&A that Emily will jump through it shortly. Remember last year when we sat here around this time, people were saying, we love Viva Engage, Yammer, it's Viva Engage. And it seems to me like that branding has now, like, I rarely hear anyone talking about Yammer anymore. So I just want to congratulate. I knew we all knew it was going to take some time, but it seems like that transition has happened, and people are onto this. So everyone talks about Viva Engage now. You have a customer community that is active and vibrant, and I'm very sure that a lot of the people we have on the Viva Engage Festival are members, but I also quite sure that a lot of them that are not members of that community. I just want to make sure that you get an opportunity to just talk about, mention that community and how people can join that. Steve, I know you put a link to it for a lot further on in the chat today, but maybe just remind people about how they can come in here, because we have about 15 minutes there today, and there's going to be lots and lots and lots of questions that people have that extends far beyond today, and we're all about building a community. So can you talk a little bit about how people get access to that, who they might find in there, and then we'll get back to the other Q&As.
Yeah, I can talk about it real quick. It's we'd love for folks to join that community. We think it's a community that is very diverse, in that it's folks from IT, but it's also a lot of folks from Corp Comms. It's folks like you, folks that are running communities, running your Engage networks. It's a place where folks like Murali, Lauren, all the people that you see here participate actively. So it's a way for you to engage directly with us as the product organization. It's a way for you to connect with other customers. We oftentimes see customers posting, how are you doing this? Or how are you handling this situation? I'm seeing this bug. Is anybody else seeing it? People are comparing notes about their own experiences of using Engage. Quite vibrant. It's a very vibrant network, and would love for you to join. I put the link in the chat. Just fill out that form, and we'll get you invited and get you connected in.
Fantastic. Now, maybe I'll just refer back to the Q&A for a few more questions as well. I would love some insights on this. Do you think there are any regional differences in the ways that different organizations are using Viva Engage at the moment? We have a hypothesis from Matt in the Q&A here. Perhaps maybe North America is more storyline or individual or profile focused, whereas maybe in Europe and APAC is it more community focused? I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on what those regional differences might be, if any.
Yeah, I was replying to this because I actually feel like the corporate culture is the primary driver, not whether they're European, APAC, or US. We have some APAC and European customers who are very active in storyline, but it's because their CEOs and their C-suite are very active in storyline. So it really is about the corporate culture, how they communicate, how broadly they communicate. I think that drives the behavior even more so than the region. There are some geocentric tendencies, but it really is a corporate culture that I have discovered in the customers I've talked to that lead how it's used.
I think it's very hard to tell because obviously we don't have visibility into the content itself of the platform. But in talking to customers, I'd say I'm just blown away by Asia Pac, especially ANZ. How active they are with platforms such as this. You have a big country and you have employees in many of these companies in far-flung places, especially in Australia. It's been very strong. But, I think the places where we've seen most success if we get leaders actively involved on these platforms. And that varies by company. There's some US leaders who do that. There are people in Europe, as Sandra says, it's sort of non-dimensional from a regional perspective. I'd say the one thing is that if there are in the US, we find employees be a little more, I don't know if it's bold or they might take you in different directions in the conversation. I mean, we've heard a little more from customers here about conversations going out of whack. But, that's also very anecdotal. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of differences, frankly. We've got great customers all over the world. Consulting companies have always been strong users of our platforms. I think we've talked about this broadly. Accenture is a great customer of ours. And many of the consulting companies around the world, and they have a very diverse workforce, and they happen to be sort of global.
Accenture presented in the very first inaugural festival.
Yeah.
Indeed, and I
That's
think they
terrific.
also have that particular challenge here because people come to those companies expecting that they are engaging with a global knowledge base. So it makes sense for them to use this.
Now, I probably have about 2 more questions. I might just jump to one that came through as part of our pre-event survey, just to share a few things and questions that people were interested in. What customization options and tools are available in Viva Engage?
Probably the main things that we allow for, I think when people are thinking about customization, and lead me in a different direction, Emily, if this is not where the question is headed, but a lot of what people want is some level of branding and helping to make sure that the network feels like their own. So I'd say the first thing that we make available is the opportunity for you to have the company logo in the top right portion of the homepage. That's one of the main things. Of course, there's lots of branding elements that are available at the M365, sort of this what's called the suite navigation bar at the top. There's opportunities there as well. But I think even when we were looking at some of the things that Australia Post from their session earlier today, and I think even like Tata Steel and that presentation, you saw when you were looking at their network that things like the community cover photos, just doing simple things like that really lend themselves towards making the network feel like like it's part of that company, right? And then I think even going beyond that, I think as the network matures and as there's more content being posted by obviously your own employees, I think the nature of the contents that show up in your feed and the conversations that are happening in the community just organically that are about your company, in a lot of cases, what our customers say is that feeds their own brand itself, and even talking about things that are happening within the organization. I think those are elements that make it feel like their own, and these aren't configurations or settings, right? These are, again, going back to a lot of what Sandra was talking about earlier. It's about your own company culture, using the platform as the sort of the megaphone for your company culture and your brand. I think those are ways that help to make the network sort of feel like its own.
And I think maybe a nice way to round out the AMA as well, I'm not sure if each of you maybe have some input on what you'd like to share for this one, but what do you think are the most exciting capabilities or features that are coming to Viva Engage in 2025? What can we get excited about?
Paul, I think this is a good one for you.
I think it round robin here would be a great idea, but I'm going to steal Lauren's answer from earlier. The work that we're doing to bring some of the great capabilities, starting with Storyline from Engage into native teams, is going to be a real game changer. Bringing our collaboration and communication spaces together into one frame where you can solve all of those jobs. And there's, Teams has some holes, right? Like, the people experience in Teams is not great. And that's actually why we started with Storyline. So to bring that personal element, have something that feels like a richer people card, personal expression. And so we're starting there. But I would say look forward to the native capabilities of Engage coming to Teams.
Yeah, I just think that the Teams integration is going to be a game changer because, many of you, especially the Swoop folks, have been looking at these social networks for quite some time. Obviously, starting with Yammer in the past, and then I don't know if you dabbled in things like Chatter and Social Cast, but of course there was Workplace, and then now Engage. It was always this separate product, this experience, something you went to somewhere else, and it was this different thing you did versus any of the other tools that we use for communications. And we talked about Outlook or Teams. Our view is that we blend these things together in a way tastefully, such that an end user doesn't have to go about this dissonant process every day about what do I do at this moment in time? How do I engage? How do we, we talked about how do we get more people to engage on these platforms? The reason is that they have to go somewhere that's not a daily habit. So I think that Teams integration creates that daily habit. The one thing that it may not be immediately clear is, in fact, we're going to do this fairly early, maybe even by the end of the first calendar quarter of next year, is bring Engage mobile experiences into the Teams mobile app. Mobile is the richest place where we get deep engagement from end users. And I'm sure your benchmarks see that as well. Mobile is like a very special platform. And if we can expand that to a number of users, and I think you will find that this platform becomes the preeminent way in which people communicate at scale across companies. So that is very exciting. The other part is really the reverse, which is all of this latent content in Engage. Is it possible for us to, bring it to all of these AI surfaces and be in a position where you can introduce humans in the loop tastefully where necessary to verify some answers coming out of Copilot and so on. So very excited about that as well.
Yeah, I think to build off of what Murali was saying, there's two areas that I'm really excited coming up. One of them is, Engage is one of the largest sources of public content that many corporations have. And so breaking the Engage content out of the Engage walls and bringing it to you in all the surfaces that you are used to using that information, whether it be within the Teams, experience, whether it be within search, whether it be as a resulting Copilot. Really excited about breaking all the knowledge and the wealth of conversations we have and Engage out. The second one is really the digital safety stuff that's been mentioned a couple of times, and our abilities moving forward to be able to scale that so that it's really much more efficient to manage these large networks with thousands of employees and conversations going on all the time. Our speed to being able to get out leadership communications across the company is so fast. A couple 100,000 people at Microsoft will read such as posts in a blink of an eye, and being able to moderate, watch, see what's happening, both positive and maybe not so positive, and understand that in your network through moderation and through analytics. The combination of that is just so powerful. We're starting to make the flywheels really starting to, I think, go faster as we move forward into the next year.
I think the one thing, Emily, I should mention here, which might be helpful, is I think recently we mentioned that we informed our customers that we have, I think, 66 million users around on Viva as a platform. And I just want to say to this crowd, a bulk of that is Viva Engage, a massive bulk of that, in fact, most of that. So you already have a platform that has nearly that many users. I can't quite give you the exact number, but it's very close to that number. You can see that over time, you build a platform like this to get to hundreds of millions of users worldwide. That means you're reaching employees in almost every medium to large company in the world. And you can learn from their best practices. The platform continues to get richer and grow. But now integrated into Teams, you're just going to reach all of Teams users. The last time we announced that was 325 million users. Some of them are in education and stuff. So, but you can reach a couple 100 million users on a platform such as this, with this broad social communications capability. That's very rich. And I think the people on this call are making that happen. So we really salute all the customers here. We really appreciate all the help that people have given us. We really appreciate the support that Swoop and folks have shown, especially during the dark days when we weren't investing or we weren't going the right direction. And look at where we are. And I think we are in a position where we can help every company be better in how it communicates to its most prized possession, its employees. And that's what really keeps us going every day, because we think we have a mousetrap. It's just a mousetrap in the end. It's just a tool, but it's a tool that engages employees worldwide to do their best work, to create the output that's needed to keep countries and organizations grow. It's just such a wide opportunity that exists, and I want to thank people on this call who have helped make that happen.
No, thank you. I think that is the perfect point for us to wrap up this AMA. So Murali, Steve, Lauren, Sandra, Venkat, and Paul, really, really appreciate your time to come and talk to the APAC community here today. Thank you for answering their questions. I'm sure we have lots to be excited about coming into the new year. So yeah, just wanted to say we really appreciate you and your time as well today.